Good evening, folks, and let me be yet one more administrator to welcome you to Loyola. My name is Jim Snow. I have been at Loyola for, oh gosh, nearly 30 years at this point, and my current position is the co-director of Messina, and I'll have a lot to say about Messina as the evening progresses. And I'm also a professor of philosophy. So mainly I'll speak today, or this evening, I should say, as the co-director of Messina. But I'm going to begin with, as you'll see on the next slide, I'm going to begin with a challenge. When the next slide comes up, I'm going to present you with this challenge. I want you to think about what it might mean to claim an education as opposed to receiving an education, okay? And this is not something I expect you to have a ready answer to. It's something I want you to think about. And forgive me, the next slide is going to be a little bit busy, but I want to provide some context here. Adrian Rich was addressing a group of first-year students back in 1977 at Douglas College. And she said to her students, the first thing I want to say to you who are students is that you cannot afford to think of being here to receive an education. You will do much better to think of being here to claim one. One of the dictionary definitions of the verb to claim is to take as the rightful owner, to assert in the face of possible contradiction. To receive is to come into possession of, or to act as a receptacle or container for. To accept as authoritative or true. And the difference is that between acting and being acted upon. So think about what Rich is saying here, and then begin thinking tonight, tomorrow, next week, and really throughout your first year, what it might mean to claim an education, to be the rightful owner of your education. In the next slide, I'm going to talk to you briefly as a philosopher. Forgive me. Okay. The ancient Greeks speak very eloquently, I think, to what you can expect to learn here at a Jesuit institution, at a Jesuit university. The first term I have up is techne, which is a Greek word for skill, an ancient Greek word for skill. And you're certainly going to learn skills. Think of the classes in your major. If you haven't declared a major, you probably have some idea, at least, of what you might major in. And it's going to require the acquisition of skills, right? Certainly the skills of reading critically, the skills of writing, but also think in the sciences, the skills required there in business, the skills required there. You're going to learn lots of skills. But again, we're a Jesuit institution. So at the same time, you're going to learn what's called phronesis or practical wisdom. You're going to get moral guidance, how to make sound ethical decisions, engage in sound ethical practices as to what should be done and perhaps what should be avoided. And that's going to be a large part of your education here, in addition to the techne. The third bullet point, and I'll stop using Greek terms after this, is eudaimonia. In many ways, the most important thing you might learn here. What does it mean to live a fulfilling life, a meaningful life? what does it mean to flourish as a human being? Yeah, it's important to have skills. It's important to have practical wisdom. But what does it mean to live meaningfully? In the next slide, I'm going to take you through a brief exercise. An exercise in what we call Ignatian discernment. And at the end of the evening, the end of this orientation session, another speaker will have you return to this. But let me just introduce it here. And again, these aren't questions that I expect you to have a ready answer to, but questions worth thinking about. Right? And the first question is, what brings me joy? Not happiness. What brings me joy? What brings me a real sense of meaning, a real sense of fulfillment? What makes me feel that I'm flourishing, that I'm really doing well? Not happiness, but joy. That's something you'll discover in college, I believe. Again, I don't expect you to have a ready answer. The second question is, what are my gifts and talents? What am I good at? That's something you're going to discover here in your college career. You might discover some gifts and talents you didn't know you had. You might be wowed. You might wow yourself. You know, in high school, middle school, you are reminded of things sometimes that you're not especially good at. Right? You take all these standardized tests, and I know when I do advising with first-year students, they will often say, well, I'm terrible at math, I'm terrible at foreign languages, I'm a terrible writer, whatever. And I listen to this attentively, but then I try and change the conversation a little bit. Tell me what you're good at. Tell me what your talents are. And I would suggest to you that one of the important things you can do at a Jesuit institution like Loyola is discover those gifts and talents. And then the third question is really a tough one. What's the world call me to do? What does the world ask of me? I have to listen to the world and see what I am called to do. We call this sometimes vocational discernment. And then, going back to eudaimonia, how can I match up what brings me joy with my gifts and talents and what the world calls me to do to construct a eudaimon life, a meaningful life, if you will. Right? And you're going to make some progress in this journey. I guarantee it, some progress in this journey over the next 4 years. But I want this journey, if it hasn't started already, I want it to begin tonight. So be thinking about tonight, tomorrow, next week, next year. What brings me joy? What are my gifts and talents? And what does the world ask of me? What does it call me to do? Right? This is the very heart of a Jesuit education. Right? In the next slide, I'm going to start sharing with you some of the resources to create that meaningful life, to get the most out of your Jesuit education. Then I want to talk to you a little bit about the faculty here at Loyola. All of us here, and I do speak for all of us, are here because we love teaching. Yes, we do our research, we publish our books, we publish our articles. Here you see a picture of one of our English professors, Bob Loyola, who's an internationally recognized scholar in Renaissance literature. But the real reason we're all here is our love of teaching, our love of working with students. I'm a first generation college student. I grew up in the mountains of Appalachia, and college was not really on my horizon. But through a variety of circumstances, which I won't bore you with now, I ended up going to college, and boy, it was such a moment of self-discovery, such a moment of wow. And what I remember most fondly about my first year are professors who really took an interest in me. And when I was offered the opportunity to become director of Messina, our first year living learning program, I jumped at the opportunity, recalling my own first year experience and some of the anxieties and some of the nervousness I felt about it and so forth. But I thought, boy, my professors really stepped up and really took an interest and helped me to make that transition to college. And so my hope is you will embrace us as a faculty as we embrace you as first year students. On the more practical side, how do I address my professor? Professor, last name, or doctor. So some of my students call me Professor Snow, some of my students call me Dr. Snow. Most of us on the faculty have PhDs, and I suppose more often than not we're referred to as doctor, but there are a few people on the faculty who do not have their PhDs. And if you're not sure, just refer to us as professor. We hold office hours. Time set aside each week to meet with you, to meet with students. And I want to encourage you to take advantage of those office hours. Right? If our door is open, come in, introduce yourself, sit down, or we can go across the quad to Starbucks for a cup of coffee. They're currently remodeling Starbucks, so it might be just the place to go. But get to know us, get to work with us. Take the opportunity to work with us. You're never a bother. You're never an interruption. Right? We set time aside to be with you. In the next slide, I'll say just a couple of things about other relationships that might develop or you might be able to develop with your professors, and that is joint research projects, okay? So I'll give you an example from personal experience. My research is in genocide studies, philosophy and genocide. And a couple of years ago, I was asked to give a paper presentation at an international conference at the University of Minnesota, at Minneapolis, St. Paul. And as I began preparing my remarks, I thought, I have a student who would just be a fantastic co-author, colleague on this project, right? So we spent a semester working together, developing our paper, developing our talk, very collaboratively. And then I remember on the flight up to Minneapolis, St. Paul, we're on the plane, and I turned to my colleague student and said, "Do you want me to deliver the remarks or do you want to?" And she looked at me sort of nervously and said, "I think I'm supposed to." And I said, "Yes, good answer." And that's what she did. She stepped up in front of an audience of maybe 30 or 40 scholars, genocide specialists and so forth, and presented our findings and did a wonderful job. And what a wonderful experience that was. I have sent students to Kigali, Rwanda to participate in peace and reconciliations initiatives that followed the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. And I'm not alone here. A lot of faculty are looking for students who can seize opportunities, This is claiming education, right? Sees opportunities outside of the classroom. Right? And so I would encourage you to, and this is going to sound a little intimidating as first-year students who haven't had a single class yet at Loyola, but think down the road. Next slide will highlight some other resources that we have. And the list I'm going to go through is not exhaustive by any means. It's just, if you will forgive the cliche, it's just the tip of the iceberg. On the left of part of the slide, you see our staff from the Counseling Center. And I would encourage you to think of the Counseling Center as a resource. At some point in their college career, over half of our students will take advantage of resources at the Counseling Center. You will, especially in your first year, you might have moments of homesickness. Perfectly normal, perfectly natural. During midterm, 7 or 8 weeks into the semester, during midterms, you might feel pretty stressed. Again, the Counseling Center is there to help you with those kinds of things, stress management, even time management. So don't think of, don't put any sort of stigma on the Counseling Center. Don't put any stigma on yourself for taking advantage of this resource. It's a resource, as I say, that over half of our students take advantage of at some point. A wonderful staff. I've known the director for, 30 years at this point, and I continue to admire the energy, the empathy, and the joy he brings to the job. So take advantage of it. On the right is our library. Most of you will be living within 50 to 75 feet of the library. So I would suggest to you that you take advantage of it. How's it a resource? It doesn't just store books and periodicals. It does that, of course, but wonderful staff of librarians who are there for you as resource people to help you find sources, to help you with research projects and so forth. So again, think of the library as a resource. In the next slide, I'll cover the Writing Center on the left, the study on the right. Let me say just a couple of things about these two resources. At the heart of a Jesuit education is a lot of writing. You take a lot of courses in humanities. You're required to take what we call core courses, 15 core courses in philosophy, in English, in theology, in history. Not 15 in each discipline, but a total of 15 core courses. And a lot of these courses involve a lot of writing. Right? I ask my students to write, first-year students to write not huge papers, but 2 to 3 page papers for my classes. And some people are a little intimidated by writing, but we have this wonderful writing center where you make an appointment. You go in, here's my assignment. You say to a tutor, that is a writing faculty member or a peer tutor, and they help to guide you through that process. And again, no stigma attached for going to the Writing Center. It's a wonderful resource. Part of claiming an education is taking advantage of these resources like the Writing Center. The study is another wonderful resource. As the picture suggests, it provides a space, if you will, to a quiet space to do your work and your homework and so forth. But they also have a large staff that offers workshops and personal assistance with things like study skills. And one of the most popular resources they offer is time management. I hear from my first year students semester after semester that time management is one of the biggest challenges. Right? You're only in class, maybe 15 hours a week, and it seems like you have all this free time. And of course you do. And of course, coming in as first year students, you want to make friends, you want to get to know people in your residence hall, maybe people in your classes, and so forth. But you're also called upon to effectively manage your time. You've got a paper due in 3 weeks. When are you going to start it? You've got a midterm coming up in biochem. When are you going to start preparing for it, and so forth? So that's just one of the services the study offers. They also offer peer tutoring in almost all subject areas, but especially those of you who are going to be taking calculus 1 or calculus 2, depending on where you place. You might find that you would benefit from having a tutor. Right? The next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about Messina. So you've been placed in a Messina class. In fact, you've been placed in Messina pairing. And whoever your fall professor is in Messina, regardless of what the class is your academic advisor. She or he will be in touch with you, next week, if he or she has not been in touch already, to get to know you. And the first task of that Messina advisor is to help you get registered for the fall courses. You're registered for your Messina course. You might be registered or pre-registered, I should say, for another course. But that leaves 3 or possibly 4 courses that beginning next week, actually beginning on the 28th, you will need to register for, and your advisor is going to be the person to help you with that. And also, your advisor is somebody who's going to help you with the transition to university studies, the transition to college, and so forth. Okay? Part of the Messina team is also what we call a mentor. This is a staff person, an administrator. You met Sarah Scalzo at the initial session today. She's a Messina mentor, right? And their job, they meet with you once a week in what we call an enrichment session. And their task is to help you find your way around Loyola. Right? Third bullet, your evergreen. An evergreen will actually be in touch with you fairly soon, but this is a person who will be with you throughout the year. Our evergreens are our student leaders, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and they are really your go-to person for various questions about the university, about housing, and so forth. I've never met I believe we have about 94 evergreens at this point, and I've yet to meet one that I've not been wowed by. So get to know your evergreen, a wonderful resource person. The next slide will say just a few things about the structure of Messina and what it looks like. Sorry, this slide's a little bit busy, but let me highlight the key points. As I said, faculty member is core advisor, your Messina mentor, who's an administrator, your evergreen who's a student, but also in your residence hall, you will have an RA, a resident assistant, who is another great resource person. Your Messina classes are very small classes. Most of them are 16 students, a few are 15. I think maybe we had to do 17 students in one or two of the classes. But a large part of what we do in Messina is called a living learning program, right? So yeah, you take classes, but your evergreen and your mentor also help with the transition to college. And then we also use this as an opportunity to introduce you to Baltimore. I know a few of you are from the area, but many of you are not. And it would be a shame to live in such a wonderful city and not have opportunities to take advantage of the city. Now, your Messina class will meet 3 times a week, and that's a regular formal class, although taught seminar style. There's a 4th hour that's called enrichment, and that's usually run by the evergreen and by the Messina mentor. And that's where the focus is not so much on the academics, but the focus is more on the transition to college. Okay. The next 4 slides, well, we'll go through them one at a time. I'm going to talk just a little bit about themes. So one of the Messina themes, your Messina faculty are paired. So I'm paired with somebody in theology. I'm paired with somebody in biology. I teach 2 sections. And what brings those 2 courses together are these themes, right? So the first theme, self and other, what are the stories we tell about ourselves, right? How do we construct ourselves as Americans, citizens of the United States? And how do we construct other people who are not part of our community? This has been especially interesting of late with all the problems surrounding immigration on the southern border, and to think about how various politicians construct the other who wants to come to the United States. Some politicians construct the other more compassionately than others. We also tell ourselves lots of stories we tell. What are the stories, here the question comes up, what are the stories we tell in constructing our identities? Right? What are the stories we tell about, say, American exceptionalism, which might come up in one of your history courses, for example? Then there's the visionary. How do philosophers and theologians and others envision or see the ideal society? Right? And then finally, there is the good life. If we can bring up the next slide, the good life. Well, this goes back to Ignatian discernment, doesn't it? What brings me joy? What are my gifts and talents? What does the world call me to do? How do I construct a good, fulfilling, meaningful life? Now, the one additional thing I'll say, if we could bring up the next slide, an additional thing I'll say about Messina is next Wednesday, we are going to send you a common text, a text that we ask everyone in the first year class to read, and then Mike Puma, the other co-director of Messina, and I were to build a program around that common text. And you'll see that this common text, called the Master Plan, the author talks about his experiences of mass incarceration in the Washington, D.C. area, and how he's managed to construct a good life after his release from prison. But part of the importance here, what I want you to see, as the title of this slide suggests, is we are a university deeply committed to diversity, to inclusion, and to racial justice. And you'll see this come up in many of your classes. It's a major topic in my philosophy classes, but the events that we construct over the course of the year will also reflect our commitment to inclusivity and to dismantling systemic racism and working for a more just and a more compassionate society, I should say. Other great resources, if we go to the next slide, CCSJ, the Center for Community Service and Justice. At the very heart of Jesuit education is becoming women and men for others. And so we have a large program of community service, and we'll invite you, we would never force you, but we'll invite you to become involved in service in the community. There's opportunities to do it once, to do it twice, to make a year-long commitment. But some of our courses are also designated as service learning courses. So part of what's taught in the class complements your service in the community. Right? So the slide on the left here shows the farmers market that we host on our property, or on our campus, I should say, not our property, beginning in late spring and continuing into the fall. So the farmers market will be there when you arrive in late August. Another big part of what we do, and now I'm looking at the picture on the right, is our study abroad program. Over half, maybe 2/3 of our students do study abroad their junior year. This, for many students, is a life changer. You go for a semester, you have the opportunity in some cases to go for a year to study at a university outside of the United States. Many of our students go to England, some go to Ireland, some go to New Zealand, some go to Australia, some go to South Africa, some go to our European campuses that we partner with. I co-directed the study abroad program in Brussels, Belgium for a couple of years. I did the study abroad program in Rome for a semester, although I stayed for a year. And, you know, back to that Messina theme of self and other, it's so illuminating to be on a campus in another country with international students. And yeah, there might be a couple more or a couple other Loyola students there with you, but you get to see some of the world. It's pretty exciting. Start thinking about it now. Where would you like to study? Loyola / study abroad. You can see the campuses that are available. And I say think about it now for a number of reasons. One is it's something to look forward to. Two is there are requirements for GPA. Some, depending, you'll probably have decided on a major by your junior year. Some campuses are better complement some majors than others. But again, this is a crazy, wonderful opportunity that is available to all of you. Mm. So be thinking about that and be looking forward to it. We do a lot of things, as the next slide will show, to build community. So on the left is Messina group that goes to a local farm. And I believe this professor is still doing this every year. An opportunity to get off campus and to see things and experience things you might not typically experience in a classroom or on campus. The smaller picture on the right is one of my Messina groups from a couple of years ago who came over to the house for lunch. I live, according to my Fitbit, about 700 feet from campus, or I should say 700 steps from campus. And so I will, on occasion, bring students over to share a meal, to play ping pong, to play badminton, to just hang out. Right? And this is a wonderful way of building community, getting to know one another. Next slide. We have a pretty robust varsity sports program. This may have been mentioned in your first session today. We're part of the Patriot League. We have nationally ranked teams in lacrosse. Often our soccer team is nationally ranked. These are highly competitive teams. We have a great basketball program under a new coach. But in addition to attending these, we also have a robust intramural sports and club sports program. So something else to take advantage of. On our campus, and I realize most of you haven't been to campus, on the right is a statue of St. Ignatius, the founder of the Society of Jesus in the 15th century. And for those of you who are interested, we also have a very big campus ministry program, which is another opportunity you might want to take advantage of in your time here at Loyola. So if you are interested in joining a religious community or a spiritual community, it's there for you. Now, we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to share one more slide. And I want you to think about the importance of community, but I'm going to call on you to think about not just fitting in, but think about what you might do to help support each other, to build community, right? To make Loyola better. We're almost perfect, but we're not perfect. So be thinking about what you can do individually with your Messina group to promote and build that inclusive environment that I spoke of earlier. We're excited to have the most diverse class we've had to date, but diversity brings with it the need to uh, make people feel included. Right? So I'm going to pause here. If you would take a minute to post any questions that you might have, the staff from Event Services, once you post them, will forward them on to me. So please, any questions that you might have, and as you're thinking about a question or entering a question, I'll say a couple of things in response to questions I got when we did a Tuesday session here. And one of the questions is, how do I sign up for Messina? You already have. You are already registered for a Messina class, and you already have a Messina advisor. One of the questions I got on Tuesday was, how do I apply for Messina? You don't. You're in Messina. And another question I got was, how do I find an advisor? You don't. You have an advisor. And as I said a couple of minutes ago, she or he will be in touch with you. Beginning on very soon, beginning on probably the 28th. I also want to remind you that my email address is jsnow, S-N-O-W, J as in James, and well, it's on the screen there, jsnow@loyola.edu. So as questions come up, don't hesitate to reach out to me, right? That's why I'm here. That's a major part of my job, and as a part of my job, I take great joy in, right? Answering questions that you might have, right? This is a big transition period, isn't it, right? This is crazy time. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you would prefer, we can always meet by Zoom, although you might be zoomed out at this point. But that is certainly a possibility as well. So anything you're the least bit apprehensive about, don't hesitate to reach out to me. A question just popped up about registering for classes. It opens on June 28th. Let me make sure I have the question right here. Yeah, a question came in, when does the advisor help you sign up for your classes? I'm writing to my advisees tomorrow. If you haven't heard from your advisor yet, you'll probably hear tomorrow or at the latest next week. And he or she will, you sign up for your classes yourself, but your advisor will reach out to you, will schedule a Zoom meeting, most likely. We have a record as advisors of what you're signed up for already, what your Messina assignments are, and we'll just give you a little bit of guidance so as to make really good choices. The other thing I should mention is, as we wind down here, you have one more session as part of orientation, and it's an important session. And so you need to, when we sign off here, you need to go back to the first room you were in with Sarah Scalzo, with Dr. Thomas, with, two or three others. Go back to that room, and Sarah Scalzo will host a closing session. So that's where you are going to go from here at 8:30. So we're scheduled to end at 8:20. It is 8:20, so thank you very much, and don't hesitate to reach out to me. And also your Evergreen is going to be in touch with you shortly too. So again, thanks so much, and I look forward to meeting you in the fall. Bye, folks. See you later.